What a wonderful world.
Welcome to See and Learn on Saba 2014. Today, we'll be discussing some of the events that took place during the first 2 weeks of October and talking to some of the visiting experts that came to Saba to share their knowledge on a wide-ranging selection of nature topics. We are also very pleased to welcome back Brent Winner from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. Brent did us the honor of being the opening night speaker with a special talk on shark sex. See and Learn's intern, Serena Rivero, sat down with him for a more in-depth conversation on shark conservation in the Caribbean.
So as Saba has a marine park, how do you feel about marine parks protecting the local environment and shark populations?
Yeah, marine protected areas in general are a great idea because you are protecting Saba's reefs, and that in turn protects a lot of different levels within the marine ecosystem. As you know, sharks move. They'll go in and out of that marine protected area and don't know that they've went through it in a sense. They may find that, well, maybe there's more food available there or whatever. But that doesn't negate the value of those marine protected areas and their importance. It's kind of like a safe haven for sharks that they can't be collected or caught through those areas. And if you have enough of those types of areas, they're going to, in a bigger picture, actually improve the survival of sharks, on a larger scale.
So as a local strategy, how do you feel it affects the global strategy to protect sharks?
Saba sharks are the same as Florida sharks, are the same as North Carolina sharks. A lot of these species that you see here, we see there, and they move in between. So you've got to have proper science and monitoring over a long-term period that would allow you to understand what sharks does Saba have, how do they behave, what times of year are they here, are they big sharks, are they little sharks? Are the numbers going up? Are they going down? How does that relate to the bigger picture?
Yeah.
And it's that kind of information that we can use to actually, manage the population on a larger scale.
Yeah. So why is it that we actually fish for sharks in the first place?
Well, men have been catching sharks for, hundreds of years. As far as fisheries go, we have records in the United States that date back to the early 1900s. And regardless of the area, whether it was Pacific or Atlantic or what species it was of shark, those fisheries are usually like a boom or bust kind of situation. So you'll have a demand for a certain product. Back in the early 1900s, it was shark liver oil, and they would get the squalene oil from the shark livers. So they would find that they could make tons of money off of harvesting these sharks, and they'd harvest, and then the bust would come because they'd fish out all the local populations and the fishery would collapse. And that's been true for decades relating to sharks. And the main reason that is because of the life history strategies of most shark species. Number one, they mature very late. So a lot of shark species will take 10, 15 years plus before they're actually mature, depending on the species. They also grow very slowly, so larger females can have more pups, type of thing. So their growth is very slow, and lastly, they're not very fecund, which means they don't have very many pups at one time. And even in those situations where, a blacktip shark may have 6 pups, she may take a year off and then come back the next year and have 6 more pups. So you could see with the combination of those 3 life history strategies, it's very hard for shark populations to rebound from heavy fishing effort, that type of thing.
Yeah.
As far as shark products, in the early 1900s, it was shark liver oil. It's not much of a product anymore because of synthetic vitamin A, but they've harvested them for their hides, for their meat, and more recently for their fins, for Asian soup. Shark fin soup is a very equitable market for fins.
Yeah. So you were talking about how reproductive strategies can affect conservation efforts. So do you feel that scientific information is invaluable in trying to protect sharks?
You hit the nail right on the head, Serena. That's critical. It's critical. If you look at the most recent run of shark fisheries and the problem that's facing us, it wasn't that long ago in the early 1980s that there were no shark fishing regulations, whether it was recreational or commercial. It was just a free-for-all. And that whole post-Jaws era, late 70s kind of thing, recreational guys were going crazy, catching and killing large sharks. And we're still trying to recover from that. And as well as the resurgence of commercial shark fisheries went from next to nothing to millions and millions of pounds that have been harvested, shark finning problems, all that type of thing. To keep in perspective, in '89 is when I started at the Fish and Wildlife Research Institute. At that point in time, there were no state or federal shark regulations in place. There were no prohibited species. Now, 25 years later, I'm still working there. We have 27 prohibited species, and we've been managing shark populations since the early 90s. It was 92 or 93 when we put that into place. And the way they've been monitoring or actually managing those sharks is one through landings quotas, trip limits, size limits, so you let the sharks grow to a certain size so they mature and they can reproduce. We also have them keep the fins attached to the carcass, so you can't fin a shark, throw the meat away. You can't land a shark unless the fins are attached to it. So that kind of prevents or prohibits, or at least minimizes finning.
Yeah.
And then lastly, they're even putting into place like time area closures related to spawning periods or pupping nursery areas, that type of thing. But to go back to what you said about science, we can't put those as scientists or managers, we can't put any of those pieces into place unless we don't have the science to back it up. If we don't understand the reproduction, if we don't understand the population numbers, the migrations, the movements, the seasonality, the sex ratios, all that kind of stuff we need to understand to be able to set those limits. So the science is critical.
So you've been talking a lot about your strategies and what you've been doing in your research and your life work. What is your long-term plan?
Well, I guess long-term plans for any fishery is long-term sustainability. It's not to close the fishery. That might be a quick and easy fix, but better off you want to maintain the fishery and manage it properly. And we're learning more and more about individual species and how we can manage and set quotas and that type of thing. There are certain sharks that are on 50-year recovery plans, and they're prohibited from harvest. So you cannot land a dusky shark. You can't land a Caribbean reef shark in the United States. A white shark has been prohibited for many, many years. And through that, catch and release type thing, it's going to allow those populations to slowly recover over the years and hopefully get back to levels, that they were at just, 20, 30 years ago.
Another underwater expert that joined us is Joe Pawlik. His specialty is sponges. I met up with him earlier this week to find out more about our specimens on Saba. Welcome to See and Learn, Joe. You've done quite a few dives here. Can you tell us about how our sponges are doing down there?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. It's been a wonderful time, and I've really enjoyed the dives here in Saba. The sponge populations here are luxuriant, to say the least. Beautiful tube sponges of many different colors. The sponge community is very healthy. There are plenty of fishes that eat sponges, so the proportion of the different species represented here in Saba is very healthy. The interesting thing is how many sponges there are. That is the cover of sponges. It's about as high as I've seen it anywhere in the Caribbean.
And why are their populations increasing?
Well, here in particular, they're increasing because there's so much space for them to colonize, and that's partially because a lot of the rocks and reef around Saba are volcanic and not biogenic or coral. So it's kind of like free real estate for them, and their populations are taking advantage of that free real estate. In part, the other thing about the sponge community here is that it's very well balanced. There are plenty of fishes that feed on sponges, and those are present in good abundance here in Saba. If you compare this site to some of the other islands in the Leeward Island chain where they overfish their reefs, where they use fishing traps, you see that other species of sponges that grow very rapidly sort of take over. But here in Saba, there's a nice balance between those sponges and the really big, very colorful sponges like the bright lavender tube sponges and the bright yellow tube sponges. Those turn out to be the ones that don't get eaten by these kinds of fishes.
It's good to hear about the healthy balance between the purple and yellow tube sponges, but when I go diving, I see lots of the giant barrel sponges. How are they doing?
Oh, you've got plenty of giant barrel sponges here in Saba, and some really magnificently large ones. We call these sponges the redwoods of the reef, and for a very specific reason. They're very large, and they also turn out to be very old. And we've been studying a population on some plots where we mark off all the individual sponges, and have been doing this since 1997. And using digital photography, we've been able to estimate the age of the sponges in Florida and generate a model that allows us to determine the age of any sponge that's separate that you measure. And so all you really have to do is measure the top opening, that's called the osculum, and you measure the overall height of the sponge, and you measure the circumference around the base, or you measure the diameter and multiply by pi. And the result is you plug those into a formula that we have on our website, and it tells you how many years old the sponge is. So I did some of this back in my cottage with a total of 6 of the largest sponges that I found at about 20 meters. And the ages ranged from a little over 100 years to about 250 years. And I figure that the sponges that are in even deeper water are considerably older than that, because by all accounts you have some really large ones deeper than 20 meters.
Adrian Delnevo is now a familiar face on Saba, as he's been studying the local bird population for many years. This year, he decided to talk about hummingbirds.
We've come to the windward side because all 3 species of hummingbirds on Saba occur in this area. And the object of the trip was to try and see what types of flowers that they might be feeding on, and hopefully see all 3 species.
As part of the field trip, you put up a mist net. Can you explain why that was useful?
Well, the net is a very handy tool that biologists use to catch species that are otherwise very difficult to catch. In this case, it's a 12-meter net held between 2 rigid poles, and the birds can't see it very well, and they fly into it and are suspended almost like in a hammock, and they're perfectly fine. They're not injured in any way. Although we put the nets up and we were primarily interested in hummingbirds, we actually caught many banana quits, and I took out probably 30 or 40 banana quits from the net. But that was also very nice to see banana quits close at hand, and I was able to let people that wanted to hold them, to see them close, to see the differences between adults and young birds, sometimes between males and females, and so that was quite enjoyable. And we didn't catch a hummingbird till right at the very end, and that was a green-throated carib.
You mentioned there are only 3 species of hummingbirds. Many people think there are more. Can you explain the differences between them?
Absolutely. Yes, there are only 3 species, but 2, 3, or perhaps sometimes 4 species is very common throughout the Caribbean. We have 3, others only have 2, 1 or 2 islands have 4, but somewhere in that fairly low number is the number of different species that we have. And they're quite different. The purple-throated carib is quite a large hummingbird, about 10 to 11 centimeters tall, and it's mostly found on higher elevations in the island, somewhere from about windward side up towards the top of Mount Scenery. And the purple-throated is very distinctive. The next most common hummingbird is the green-throated carib, and that's found from about the windward side down to about halfway down to the coast. It's essentially all green, a nice iridescent green with a very small and highly iridescent blue patch on its breast, which unfortunately you don't see very often. That's the second species. And then the third species is much smaller. It's only about 9 centimeters tall. It only weighs about 4 grams. And that does occur in windward side, but it also occurs much lower down towards the coast.
We all love to see hummingbirds around our houses. How can we do that properly?
Well, the best way is to plant local plants. That's the best way to do it, because those plants have evolved over many thousands of years. They probably have lots of nectar, and those would be great for the hummingbirds. The next best way is perhaps to introduce artificial feeders for hummingbirds, and those are very helpful for them as well. The males will protect those just as they will native plants as well. But the only thing about the hummingbird feeders is that you need to ensure that you have the right ratio of hopefully brown sugar to water, which is about four parts of water to 1 part of sugar. But the really crucial thing is that that gets changed probably every 4 or 5 days. And the reason for that is that bacteria can grow in there, particularly in these very warm climates. And that bacteria or fungus can be very bad for hummingbirds. In fact, you can be helping them, but then you can make their life more difficult and may even kill them if that fungus and bacteria builds up. So it's great if you produce hummingbird feeders, but and of the right water to sugar mix, but it's really helpful if you then change that regularly so it's not negatively affecting the birds that we all want to see.
Saba's mountain scenery is famous for always being in the clouds. I sat down with atmospheric scientist Sonja Behnke to speak about this phenomenon and all things weather. Can you tell us why there's usually clouds on mountain scenery?
Well, that has to do with the mountain. The mountain totally influences the production of clouds. So in the atmosphere, there's a certain level where water vapor will condense into liquid water. And where that level is in the atmosphere, what altitude that is, depends on the humidity. So if it's really humid, it's going to be at a lower altitude. If it's less humid, it's going to be at a higher altitude. So the way the mountain influences that is the wind, brings the air from the ocean and it comes up the mountain. And because the mountain's there, the air is forced to go upward. And so you also notice that when you go higher up the mountain, it cools off. So that air goes up the mountain, and as it goes up the mountain, it cools off. And when it hits that level, that certain level, it turns into a cloud. Air gets hot at the surface, and it rises in the atmosphere. So hot things rise. So you got the red on top, the red's hot. The blue's on the bottom. Well, with the schools, I have a couple of experiments that illustrate how clouds are formed. So similar to what I was talking about with mountain scenery, we have an experiment where the kids make a cloud in a bottle. We take a bottle and we put a little bit of water into it, and so that puts a little bit of water vapor into the bottle. Then we light a match, drop it into the bottle, and screw the lid on, and that match puts aerosols into the bottle, which are little itty-bitty tiny particles that water vapor has to condense onto to make a cloud. You then take the bottle and you squeeze it, which represents the heating that occurs at the surface of the earth. And then you release the bottle, which represents the cooling that happens as air is lifted up into the atmosphere. And when you release the bottle, the water vapor condenses into a cloud. And so you can take the cap off the bottle and kind of puff the cloud out of the bottle. It's really fun.
How can I tell how far away a thunderstorm is?
Well, you can do that by counting the time between when you hear thunder and when you first saw the flash. So when you see a flash, start counting the seconds, 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. Every 5 seconds in between, is a mile. So if you count 5 seconds in between the flash and the thunder, that's 1 mile. If you count 10 seconds, that's 2 miles. That gives you a rough idea of how far away a thunderstorm is.
What should I do if I hear a thunderstorm while hiking up Mount Scenery?
So the best thing that you can do if you're out in a thunderstorm is to get inside a building. But if you're on top of Mount Scenery, you can't do that obviously, so you want to just descend down the mountain as quickly as possible.
If it's not raining, is it okay to be outside?
Not really. As long as you can hear thunder, you're in danger. The rain doesn't really have anything to do with whether the lightning danger is greater or not.
But what if I see a thunderstorm in the distance?
So even if a storm's in the distance, there's still a little bit of a danger. You can hear thunder from a storm at a distance of about 10 miles away. And there's also a certain type of a discharge that can come out of the side of a cloud and propagate horizontally and come to ground. And we've seen those types of discharges, we call them bolts from the blue. We've seen those discharges travel about 10 miles away from a cloud. So even if it's in the distance, there's still a little bit of a danger. And basically the phrase is, if thunder roars, go indoors. So if you could hear it, you should probably go inside.
But what if I'm on a boat?
If you're on a boat, it depends. It depends on the kind of boat you have. If your boat just is totally open and doesn't have a cockpit, you just want to get off the water as quickly as possible. If it does have a cockpit, you can get inside that and close the doors, and you'll be much safer.
They're everywhere, but often overlooked. Saba anole lizards are unique to the island. Serena caught up with microbiologist Susan Perkins, who have been studying these creatures for many years.
It was great being back on Saba. I've been coming here a long time, working on the lizards here, and it's always fun to show people how special and exciting these lizards are. And in fact, they're unique. So there's just a single species here, Anolis tabanus. It's only found on Saba, nowhere else in the world. And the males are cute with spots and defending their territories. The females are a little more drab, but it's a unique anole. It's only found here on Saba.
So where did these lizards come from originally? How did they get here?
The Saba anole used to be thought to be a relative of the ones on St. Martin. That made sense because it's close by island, and maybe those lizards came over here and changed into the Saban anole. But now we know, thanks to the use of DNA, using genetics, that the Saban anole actually is related to the lizards from Guadeloupe. And that might seem like a very far distance to travel to get from Guadeloupe to Saba. But if you think back into the Pleistocene time when the sea levels were lower, there actually was a big bank off the coast of Saba, a much larger island. And so what now we think happened is that the lizards from Guadeloupe made it to that larger island, grew into a big population, and then began to colonize Saba. So we now have this unique lizard, but very, very diverse. There's lots of genetic diversity in the Saban anole.
So you're a microbiologist by trade. And what brings you to Saba to study the anoles?
Well, I'm actually studying parasites in the lizards that are a type of lizard malaria.
Oh, wow. And is it something we should be worrying about? Is it harmful to people?
Humans can get malaria, but it's a totally different kind of malaria. So lizards have their own type of parasite. Humans have their own type of parasite. We can't get theirs, and they can't get ours either. But we can study the parasites in the lizards. We can learn a little bit about human malaria, but the parasites in themselves are really interesting too. So.
And is it harmful to the anoles themselves as well?
You might know when humans get sick with malaria, they get fevers, they don't feel very well. We actually have been studying the parasites in the lizards, and it doesn't seem to affect them like that at all. So they seem to go happily along with their daily lizard lives, even though they might have quite a few of the parasites in their blood. Even when they're tiny, tiny lizards, if you can see those scales, you know it's a male.
So you've been looking at the malaria parasites in their blood, but what other parasites do they have?
There are 3 different species of malarial parasites in the Saban lizards. So we've been studying those and looking at how they might change in proportion over time. The Saba anoles also have a bunch of other parasites. So they have another blood parasite called a hemogregarine. They have pinworm parasites that live in their guts, and you might have seen them if you've ever picked one up, little orange spots on them. Those are tiny little mites, so they're ectoparasites. They feed on a little bit of blood or tissue from the anole from the outside. So I've been coming here a long time, over many years, and a few years ago we noticed that the parasites were almost gone, which made me worried that I wasn't going to get to come back anymore. But now they've rebounded, which is giving us new questions to ask, such as maybe the lizards and their immune genes interact with the parasite. So we get these cycles with the parasites catch up, a lot of lizards are infected, then the lizards can evolve and be immune to them, and then the parasites disappear for a little while. So we're going to use these samples I've collected over almost 20 years to see if that cycling is really happening.
So how do the anoles get infected by the malaria parasite in the first place?
That's a tough question that we still haven't fully answered. So most people know that humans get malaria from bites of mosquitoes, but we're not sure if mosquitoes are what's transmitting it between lizard and lizard here. So it's definitely some kind of arthropod, an insect, or maybe the mites, but we're really not sure. But something is transmitting it between lizards.
Thanks for watching this first update on the activities of See and Learn on Saba 2014. I'll be back at the end of the month with the final report.
I think to myself, what a wonderful